developer. He's been on several times already to the show. And also Andy Freer. He is also one of the developers over at Dash. And Evan and Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's fantastic to be here.
Always glad to have you guys. Andy, that was you, or Evan, that was you responding. Andy, are you there too?
Yeah, hi guys, this is Andy.
Okay, excellent. Just making sure. Well, guys, let's do some preliminary stuff for new listeners. It's a little redundant at this point, but I know we have plenty of new listeners who may not have heard previous guests from your team on the show and may not know what Dash is. So let's do a quick rundown of that. But before we do, tell us a little bit about yourselves, guys, and how you got into crypto and specifically Dash. And Evan, I'll start with you.
So I got into crypto in 2011 when I discovered Bitcoin. And I was just astonished with this new technology and obsessed with it ever since. The reason I started Dash was because I saw there was a few things missing, and the Bitcoin developers weren't really interested in going in that direction. They were very concerned about putting out other fires. And so I figured, we should have more options in the market, and we should have examples of how this other technology could work. And so that's where Dash came from.
Yeah, and I like the way you put that. Being a fan of Dash here at the show, we're still fans of Bitcoin. I think there is room for both in this town, as the saying goes. And, just like in any market, there's room for product differentiation, there's room for multiple products, and there's room for competition. And competition just makes everybody better off in the long run. Including Bitcoin and Dash competing with each, and to the extent that they may compete with each other. But he's right. Bitcoin to this day has had some trajectory sidelines, if you will, having to do with, of course, the block size debate and other aspects of the protocol and modifications to it. And a lot of that has to do with various disagreements and perhaps even dragging of the feet by its lead developers. And that left room for people like Evan Duffield and the team at Dash to provide an alternative. And they've done a very great job of that. And Dash, in fact, does offer things, very important things that Bitcoin doesn't. And so we'll get into that too shortly. Andy Freer, go ahead and tell us too a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into Bitcoin, and how you came to be with the Dash team.
Yeah, so I was into kind of peer-to-peer technology. I missed out on the kind of hearing about Bitcoin until 2014, and then I kind of had a look around different altcoins, mining like as a hobby, and then got interested in Dash when I saw kind of what Evan was doing with the peer-to-peer side of it, incentivizing nodes, and then kind of was watching what was happening, and he was doing private transactions, then instant transactions, all of that's supported by an incentivized network, and then kind of he came out with a governance system, and that's when I kind of I thought, wow, that's really good, and then just started chatting with Evan on the forum. He said, are you a developer? Why don't you join the team, contribute? So, and that was kind of a year ago. And then just kind of got more and more involved with it.
Well, that's excellent. And I'm sure they're very happy to have you on the team. We'll talk on the other side of the break, since we're quickly coming upon a break, about the governance system for those who aren't familiar. And this is one of those things that distinguishes Dash from Bitcoin. And what's cool about it, without getting into too many of the specifics or technical side yet, I'll leave that for Evan and Andy, is this governance system creates more of a community, I think, in many respects, or at least empowers the Dash community more than the sort of more centralized core developer dependent community in Bitcoin, and that's definitely an advantage it has. And one thing that Dash, as well as a couple other cryptocurrencies that have kind of continued to prove themselves, is that, as I already mentioned, there is room for things besides Bitcoin. And despite all the sort of prophecies that altcoins would go away or become superfluous because of Bitcoin, that's clearly proven not to be the case. And some of those prophecies were, of course, dependent upon this sort of theoretical progress in Bitcoin that has already proven to falter in reality. And but what's great is, Bitcoin falters, competition comes in, finds niches in which it can have advantages over Bitcoin, and that may lead to Bitcoin, kind of taking account of things and improving itself. So again, that's the beauty of competition, and there's no better expression of it, I think, than in the crypto sphere. Well, we'll be right back with Evan Duffield, lead developer of Dash, and Andy Freer, developer also. Stay tuned. Of dash.org, check it out, and Andy Freer, one of the other developers. Now, I want to give a quick rundown of what Dash is all about and how it works. And of course, a key component of that, as we were talking about off air, is the governance structure. So go ahead and just start with the sort of a brief comprehensive take on Dash, and then we'll jump right into the governance structure, because there's a lot involved to that may not be immediately obvious to people hearing about the basics of it. And I'm excited to get into the details of that.
Sure. So the governance system in Dash is just completely unique. The whole idea is that we want to give everyone on the network a voice. So whether you're a user, a client, a business, or just even a developer or advertiser or anybody, you can use this system, and you can ask for permission from the network to do various things and even get paid for it. And so our motto is that we don't do anything without the permission of the network. We as a decentralized organization gave up all of our authority over the project to the network itself, and then we allow it to direct our course of action.
And that's really cool. And I like what you said, and it's true, is that really everyone has a voice in this governance structure on the Dash network. Whereas with Bitcoin, the voices are kind of concentrated amongst the core devs, maybe the is it now defunct? I forget, the Bitcoin Foundation, and then the miners. And so it's kind of concentrated in those hands, and so it's a bit less decentralized. But yeah, that's what's neat about Dash, is it has a lot more room for the entire community to have a voice.
Yeah, the other thing that's really interesting about it is, this is essentially the foundation of our decentralized organization. And I theoretically organized this system so that the DAO could operate completely independently, do all of the work for the network, and then this network could direct it. And so as a result, we've been able to raise $650,000 in funding just from purely decentralized sources without any venture capital or anything like that. So, no one owns our network. We have no debt, and we have no board of directors or investors telling us what to do or how to do it and things like that. And that's allowing us to build exactly what we want to build, which is evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. You said $650,000 have been raised thus far?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it makes it much more responsive to the community and what direction they want to take Dash in. And like you said, uniquely among crypto, most crypto at least, and certainly with respect to Bitcoin, like you said, it's not beholden to outside venture capital, and not just beholden as far as potential conflicts of interest, but beholden as far as the slow lag time between getting that going. Because Dash raises money on its own system with Dash, it's the market and the community at large funding all of these projects, and the part of the way they fund it is through the market price of Dash. And the very fact that the price of Dash has been strong as a whole means that there's a lot of confidence from the market in the inherent technology of Dash, but I think also in much of the decision making that has happened using the governance structure. Because, for instance, if there was a lot of bad decision making, that would be reflected in very negative price activity, and that simply hasn't happened with Dash. And so that's a really neat thing. Before we get to evolution, though, I want to ask you, if you can, are there any particularly standout decisions that have been made using the governance structure for various projects besides evolution, which we'll get to in a moment?
The first thing I can think of is the block size limitation. We as a network had decided to just directly ask whether we could raise the block size, which had been plaguing the Bitcoin project for over a year, and it actually split up their community. They couldn't come together with a decision, and within 24 hours we had an answer and a clear direction, a clear course of action that we could take.
Did you say within 24 hours?
Within 24 hours.
That's pretty incredible, because the Bitcoin issue is still ongoing. You do have some implementation or potential implementation of segregated witness, I know, going on, but that's still far from being resolved as far as the block size and other issues are concerned with Bitcoin. Like you said, that's been ongoing for a year and a half at least. And, especially back when this was really heated up, this debate and discussion in Bitcoin, it reminded me of the current election cycle, where there was just a lot of bickering and politicization of this decision. But with Dash, within 24 hours, the community had peacefully and smoothly decided on this change to the network, and that's pretty amazing.
The other thing about that is it keeps the community together. With projects like Ethereum, when they have a split within their community, or half of them want one thing, the other half wants another, a lot of times what happens is one half of the community will literally fork the coin, splitting the market into two separate projects with, two completely different investor bases, two completely different sets of developers. And they literally go into two different projects or companies, if you will. And we avoid that because we have a clear method of signaling. And that's a really important thing to get right in a project like this, so that you don't have some sort of systemic failure.
No, absolutely. And actually, Danny, you had
I was wondering, how do you keep from getting bad information? I mean, how do you keep from having the community vote on something that's not a good idea? I mean, kind of with Bitcoin, it's a slow pace, but hopefully they're not making a huge mistake.
Hopefully.
How do you stop from having a huge mistake?
So we're actually talking internally about improving the system so that we can deal with issues like that. The one issue that we're seeing is that the masternodes, which these are the voters, or these are essentially our Congress, if you will, they just don't have a whole lot of time to do research. And so, they will, just read a paragraph or so about it and decide yes or no. And as the project gets bigger, it's only 70 million project currently, but if it's $1 billion project and we have 10 times the funding, that's going to require 10 times the decision making as well.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about electing or delegating parts of the authority of the network to boards of research committees and different vehicles like that to automate the process, improve it, and do some real research for the network?
That's a great question, Danny, and that's a great answer. And I think that's a great idea because, mistakes happen, bad decisions can happen in even the best network. And while I think that, something like the Dash community, you have a lot of very authentic people with their hearts and minds in the right place as far as projects go. Humanity is what it is. So you still need some accountability. And the only way to do that, or one of the important ways people can do that, of course, is with, as you mentioned, research into the projects to trust but verify, as they say, what people are wanting to do. And as we come to break, it's a thing where, plus, some of it is a bit subjective. What is a mistake? I think there's certain things where everyone can agree, but nonetheless, ultimately the community decides, and an informed community, I think, is more likely to make a right decision than an uninformed community. And that's why what he said is a really good idea. So we'll be right back with Evan Duffield and Andy Freer of Dash.org. Stay tuned.
1 second.
All right, guys, welcome back. And I just want to thank Rick Rohde for finally ambling into the production studio. No, I was kidding. No, thanks, Rick, for always helping out. I want to thank all our producers, who Deb, of course, and Rick, and occasionally Eddie. Eddie Craig was the last show or the show beforehand for a bit, and they're
one with McAfee.
Oh yes. Oh, that dream I had. We won't repeat that.
Oh,
we won't. Don't worry. Check out our episode with John McAfee, though. It was pretty hilarious. I mean, and informative. But anyway, enough of that. We're talking with Evan Duffield, lead developer of Dash, and Andy Freer, one of the other developers as well. And we're going to get into Dash evolution pretty momentarily and how that relates to the governance structure. And that's what we've been talking about, is the governance structure. Before we kind of move on to evolution, though, I have a couple more questions for Evan. One is, Evan, we were talking about the fact that research is I mean, it goes without saying, like any other aspect of life, research is really important for undertaking any kind of project, especially if that project requires money from someone to the person proposing it, and in this case, of course, from the system to the particular project developers. And so can you elaborate just a little bit more on what you guys envision for these research groups and how they might function?
Sure. So I was thinking more about it from like the perspective of the network buying companies or starting companies. So they might have a business plan, and then you would get a few people that have, experience starting companies, and you would get them together and have them do the research on the startup, ask questions, and these people would invest serious time in figuring out how well they think that or how good the idea is that the company is proposing, and then they would publish research. So they would have like a 30 or 50-page report that would go out to the network, and the masternodes would just read through that and decide whether they wanted to vote yes or no. And this board could actually suggest, they could say, we think that this is a good idea. It gets our stamp of approval. Or we think this is a bad idea. And you could also do this with scientific committees. So they could review white papers to see if they were technically feasible, or you could do it with a whole array of different things. We could have research committees that do economic research on the network, and you would have scientists sitting on the boards that work at universities and things like that. So it's skills really well, and using a system like this to delegate would make the network make much better decisions over a long period of time.
I agree wholeheartedly. And what I love about this, aside from its wisdom, is that it's a microcosm reflection of the way that the broader market and society should work, beyond, of course, Dash and cryptocurrency, and where, because any good science requires a free market, essentially, literally. I mean, we think back to the days of Vatican domination of Europe and the Western world, and you had a monopolistic, coercive concept of science that you had to get approval from a monopolistic institution, and that led to bad science. Well, you still have aspects of that in the broader society today, things like the FDA and coercive monopolistic institutions that basically make decision-making in science and reduce the amount of reproducibility and even erect barriers to entry to dissenting voices, which are very crucial to the scientific process. So in other words, this is the broader society could benefit from this type of structure, and this is exactly the way any structure like this should work. And I think it's going to be a wonderful development for future decision making and projects on the network. One other quick thing, a more sort of specific question is, in a way, you addressed this more generally about Danny's question about bad decisions or mistakes in the system. I want to get back real quick before we get into evolution. We still have a good amount of time. Is the Ethereum fork that you referenced, of course, where Ethereum Classic and Ethereum that broke from the original Ethereum forked off, and you have two coins, and like you said, basically two miners, two developer teams, essentially, and all that. Does Dash have philosophically an immutability principle as far as, so like in Ethereum's case, the whole move, and I'm going to pass judgment here, I disagreed with that fork. That's my personal opinion. At the very least, that move was hypocritical because it ran contrary to the mission statement of Ethereum. Does Dash have any sort of immutability mission statement or philosophy as far as the coin? And is a fork like that even theoretically possible with the Dash governance system?
We don't have a mission statement like you're describing, but that would be a really good use of the governance system to create one. And so you would ask the network, do you agree with this assertion? Do you agree with this assertion? And then you would make it one step at a time. And then by doing that, you get the approval of the whole network for the mission statement, and then you shouldn't have any disagreements based off of that afterward.
See, and that's beautiful too. I'm sorry I wax like philosophical and all this, but again, that's how like a very free, dare I use the word, almost anarchist society would work. Is non-coercive members of the community would form these agreements for long-term rule making, because you don't need a ruler to have rules, and that is something that is beautifully demonstrated by cryptocurrencies like Dash and their governance system, and so that's really cool. And so, in case I missed it, but would a fork like that actually be possible with Dash theoretically?
Sure. You could fork the code if you got enough of the developers and investors and such. You could definitely do it, but I think that we're I wouldn't say immune to that type of thing, but it would be highly unlikely with a system in place designed to stop that sort of thing, essentially.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I mean, a sort of almost empirical difference between Dash and Ethereum is that Dash has demonstrated smooth transitioning and seamless decision making, that no one seems to have, no major elements within the community have had seemingly any problems with. Whereas in Ethereum's case, obviously a huge number of the community had a problem with the exploit, and the exploit was only made possible by sort of bad decision making and bad oversight amongst members of the community in Ethereum. And so that is a difference in these sort of historical data of cryptocurrencies. And so I think you're right. Dash so far seems to have a lot of resistance or resilience against, well, bad decision making.
I mean, it is a DAO, though, so it's kind of susceptible to the same things as Ethereum.
Yeah, I guess theoretically. Well, we've got less than 2 minutes left. I want to get to, of course, Dash Evolution, and maybe we should wait till the other side to do that. If you want to find out, or go ahead.
We've only got one more segment with Evan, but Andy can stay.
But we still have one more segment
Yes.
with Evan? Okay,
Yes.
cool. And I should have checked with you on that, on how long they were here. So that's excellent that we have one more segment with Evan, and then we'll have more time with Andy. And then after that, we might get into some election stuff just for fun. Why not? Be controversial. I make the decision making on this show. There's no community. I'm the governance system. No. Well, as we come back, check out, of course, dash.org for the general website. Check out dashevolution.com for a little bit more of the specifics on that aspect of it that you can kind of do a quick read on during the break and maybe have a little prep while Evan and Andy tell us more about it on the other side. We're excited about that. So stay tuned. We'll be back for our fourth segment with Evan Duffield, lead developer of Dash, Andy Freer, developer for Dash as well, and so much more. So stay tuned here on Logos Radio Network. And later on, when we talk about the elections, if you want to call in, do so at 512-646-1984. But later for that. We'll be back.
Is that number on purpose?
Welcome back, guys, to the fourth segment of the Crypto Show. Don't forget our sponsors, Hill Country Home Improvements, for all your roofing needs, CryptoCompare.com, and now Dash.org, who will be continuing to help us not just spread the good word about Dash, a really pretty awesome cryptocurrency, but also the philanthropic efforts that they're going to help us do over the coming weeks and months. So stay tuned for that.
Which was pretty effective because we had like a couple hundred people that filed through the trick-or-treating thing. It was kind of this long
Was
line.
it that many? I mean, I was there
There was
for
a long
bit.
line of people, one kid after another with their parents, and we were able to tell them. We would start off with Dash.org or Unsung and tell them about that, and then explain to them that a digital currency
Jump
was
into
helping
Dash.
to pay for it, right?
Which, I mean, probably a lot of them maybe had no
There were
idea
a couple
about.
there were a few people that
Really?
knew about Bitcoin and everything else.
But
so
even
it
the
was
ones that
interesting.
didn't, it's one of those things where they may not understand it at all, but that exposure repeated over time will plant a seed, and they'll eventually learn more about it, and that's really good.
Well, it's also better to find out that it's paying for feeding homeless and not buying some Coke on Silk Road or whatever.
And by that he means Coca-Cola. No endorsement implied. Well, we are, of course, talking with Evan Duffield and Andy Freer of Dash, and some really cool stuff recapping a lot of the details of how Dash works and the governance structure. And so speaking of the governance structure, one thing that is going to come from that and from the funding process is Dash Evolution. So whichever you two wants to grapple that, go ahead and give us a rundown.
I'll go through it first, and then we can get Andy's on it as well. But I suppose the main point of it is to abstract away all of the complexity out of cryptographic currency. And we want, I guess the best way to explain it is if you grabbed your grandmother and sat her in front of a computer and took her to dashevolution.com, she could run through the registration process, get signed up, log in, and she would think a normal bank. She wouldn't even know it was a cryptographic currency.
Wow.
And that's really the goal. I don't really like the complexity associated with this whole new field, and I want to get rid of it and to allow your average everyday person to utilize these services and not really have to worry about all of the things that can go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with a hardened very talented developer, complexity obviously is still a nuisance. But you're right, especially with lay people, if you will, and people new to the field entirely. The complexity is just going to be, even if there was 100% interest there, the complexity would be a total obstacle. But unfortunately, it's not so simple as to dichotomize those two, because often complexity can diminish people's interest because they get overwhelmed, they get confused, and they just feel confounded about the process. And so the easier and more user-friendly you can make any technology, especially this new space with cryptocurrency, the better. And that's so exciting that Dash is trying to tackle that.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing is that, I mean, we need complete security, simplicity, friendliness, and we need transparency with no corruption behind the entity doing all of this. And so it's essentially what we need is the perfect storm. We need a new type of organization that does it. We need a new funding model. Plus, we need all of this technology to achieve our goal. And so, that's what we're building. And we're actually getting to the final stages of actually planning and implementing it. And we're with the release of 12.1, we're going to be launching Dash Drive, DAPI, we're not launching these things. We'll have the specifications and models for how to build them of these tools that the network is going to use to build the Dash evolution on this foundation that we have.
So just to clarify, you're saying that there are already some precursor projects in the work that will be the foundation for Dash evolution?
Yeah, exactly. So our current release that we're working on is 12.1. And this is building a technology that is going to allow a decentralized API. And so we'll have wallets that are connecting to this API and able to log in and do transactions and mediate payments and search for different merchants and things like that using this API. And then based off of this technology, we'll be able to build the full Dash Evolution alpha and beta software.
And will this API be able to be integrated by other application developers and merchants, obviously, or?
Yeah, exactly. It'll be it'll have full access into the Dash ecosystem to do pretty much everything you can think of.
So it'll be just like a plug-in, kind of like Airbits is doing with their Edge login.
Yeah, I guess the easiest way to explain it is that with cryptographic currency and these related technologies, usually you have to run a full client that syncs vast amounts of data. And what we figured out how to do is to get around that and build something that is more normal to use as a developer and that is really light. You could just drop a small snippet of code in and execute whatever you wanted done.
Yeah, and I can attest. I have. I'm pretty sure my wallet, my Dash wallet on my computer is a full node, not a master node. But for instance, there's so much data, it takes a while to load. So it's cool to be able to streamline data issues like that. And so, just to clarify too, to sort of take this back to the governance structure. The precursor projects that will lead up to Dash Evolution, were these individually proposed and submitted and approved to the community?
There was a white paper that I published early on that had the specifications for all of them at the same time. And I proposed this vision to the community and asked if they thought that this was a good idea and that if this is what we should be doing, and everyone was on board from the get-go.
Excellent. And so will Dash Evolution be primarily spearheaded by the main Dash developer team like the two of you, or will you also allow outside contributions? Is it going to be open source?
So the whole project's open source. We welcome any contribution from the community. But yeah, we have 120 active people working on the project.
Wow.
And 20 full-time people as well, funded from the system. And so those are going to be the primary people that are focusing on development. And then we'll be pushing out the code, and then I'm sure we'll get lots more help after we have the first initial versions pushed out.
Absolutely. That's a big team. That's pretty impressive and awesome. And then, like you said, being open source and looking for outside help, the fact that Dash is so community-oriented and relatively decentralized, even compared to a relatively decentralized currency like Bitcoin, will only encourage that many more people to get involved and to contribute. So that's really cool. Do you have any... and obviously, this is not necessarily an easy question or a knowable answer to a question, but do you have a timeline for the rollout that people can expect for the full Dash Evolution project?
So we're expecting Evolution to be out maybe in a month about, and I misspoke. 12.1 will be out in a month or so, and that's the foundation for Evolution.
Okay, I was going to say, wow, months, wow.
Yeah, and then sometime mid next year, 2017, we'll have DAPI done and not really done, but the alpha version will be usable. We'll have a wallet that is capable of doing some very, very basic things, and then. Late 2017, early 2018, we'll have the next release. So we're going to be rolling out the technology pretty quickly after this.
And DAPI, that was one of the names of the precursor projects, right?
Yeah, DAPI is the decentralized API project.
So I like it. It's like it's decentralized. It's DAPI, like Dapper Dan from A Brother Where Art Thou, and because it's decentralized, it's a regular cryptographic oddity. I don't know if people remember. I'm trying to make a pun from that movie. Never mind. Bad joke. Anyway, probably no one got it, not because it was a bad joke.
Did you get your money back from pun school? Or what?
Yeah, I'm still taking them to court for that. We got a minute and a half left. I guess, well, Evan, I'm sorry to have you go, but we appreciate spending the full hour with us, the first hour on the show. Great stuff. We're so excited about everything you've been talking about. And I guess we'll have Andy, who is sticking with us, right, for another segment or so?
Yep.
We'll have him maybe elaborate on some more stuff. Still have a couple questions I was going to ask, but as we roll the break here in the next minute, I'm going to slightly switch gears since we're going to pick up where we left off on the other side. But I'm curious. You talked about I think a merchant directory being developed. Do we know how many merchants currently accept Dash? Do we have any idea on that?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
It's
Okay.
actually around 60 right now.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
We were asked to join. Someone had contacted us and asked us to be a user of Dash, and we've actually been taking it since it was Darkcoin. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned before,
like we're way ahead of you.
Hill Country Home Improvements takes Dash as well. Well, we're coming to break. Evan Duffield, lead developer of Dash. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks.
Really appreciate it, and we'll be
Thanks
back.
for having me.
Absolutely, we'll be right back with Andy Freer. Be trusted, so true of Trump, but also Hillary. And when will you guys get it?
Especially Hillary.
It's controlled opposition, the fake left-right paradigm, the false dialectic that the elite controlling powers give you, and you fall for it every time. And they're best friends. Trump and Hillary are best friends. Literally, Trump used to be a Democrat and he donated to Hillary. When will you get it? There's no difference. Anyway, that's not what our show is about until later. We're back with Evan Duffield, unfortunately, lead developer of Dash, had to go. We are continuing, though.
He said there was another show that was way more interesting.
Was it American Idol?
Probably.
Was that what it was that he was on? Simon Cowell?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. No, but we are talking with Andy Freer, another developer from Dash, and we've been talking about Dash evolution. And Andy, we appreciate you sticking with us. I guess if you can, one thing I was going to ask Devin, and feel free to get a little more technical.
It's Evan, but he is a dev.
I mean, Devin. Thank you.
He's a dev, and his name is Evan,
I like
but
how
it's not Devin.
Within the past 30 seconds, I said it right and I said it wrong. Evan, the Devin. But Andy, one thing I was going to ask him was to take us more specifically through how he envisions evolution to work for simplicity for users. And if you want to get a little technical, you can. It will go above our heads, but we do have listeners who can handle some of that technical speak. But go ahead and give us a little bit further detail on Dash Evolution, if you would.
Okay, sure. So, right now, if you want to access Bitcoin, if you want to access Bitcoin securely, you've got to really use a full node. Otherwise, you're going to have to go through third parties, basically. You can use SPV, but there's nothing really that lets you connect to Bitcoin kind of from the web. So, like Evan was saying, if you take PayPal users, they're used to just logging in from a browser and accessing their funds and spending their funds. We really want to be able to do that kind of user experience, but without anybody in the middle. So you'll be accessing the peer-to-peer network, but without having to be a full node or be an SPV node that goes through somebody's server.
And for those who don't know, and I just had to look it up, will you explain what an SPV node is?
Sure. So Satoshi, obviously, he created Bitcoin. His vision for Bitcoin was a peer-to-peer network. So everybody runs a client and participates in the network. He then also added that originally you could have SPV, which is simplified payment verification. And that's a kind of a light version of Bitcoin where you're only downloading a bit of the data. So you don't have to run a full node where it's going to take loads of disk space, loads of processing power. You can kind of just download little bits of it and check what's in a block, stuff like that, to make your transactions.
Now, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
Is it relatively less secure, though, I imagine, than using the full node, even the SPV?
It's not as secure as a full node,
right,
but it can be varying degrees of security, and depending on how much you download and how much you check.
Gotcha. Oh, okay, that makes sense. And real quick, since you mentioned it, do you think Craig Wright is Satoshi?
Possibly.
Good answer. Good answer. And a lot of people probably already know about that, but Craig Wright, the Australian, is he professor? I think, yeah, math professor. Really compelling story behind all that.
Craig
Wright. Thank you, Stephen Lynch. Well, excellent.
Oh, sorry, that's Craig Christ.
Right.
Wrong guy.
And so that's pretty impressive because, like you mentioned with PayPal, everybody, and I think including even like developers with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, when you take it for granted that there's any type of security with it. And of course, with non-crypto, as we've seen in recent years, there have been huge security breaches with people's information being absconded with by hackers. That is sort of inherent to old systems. But people kind of get used to that sort of balance of usability and security. It's a hard balance to strike. And so I guess how are you able to, and like you said, with Bitcoin, you do have to rely on, without using a full node or SPV, you really do have to rely on third-party software that you have to trust.
Well, you did.
Actually,
you did.
That's true. Until the Stash Node Pro.
The Stash Node Pro actually eliminates that.
Also,
problem.
go to stashnode.com to learn more about the Stash Node Pro.
And you are running a full Bitcoin node, but it's your own node,
that's
your own
true.
Wallet, and it's on your own server.
And there's a ton of usability. And
so integrate Dash or any other coin into it if you'd want to.
You could, although I think there's plenty of room for that, the Dash Node Pro and Dash Evolution coming up. And so
it's what is it? It's a bike in the box.
Don't give it away. But very good point.
Coming soon.
Coming soon, definitely. Coming soon. But let's. I guess how is it possible to strike that balance between usability and security without a third party? And I know that's sort of a vague or very sort of generic question, but I guess do your best to answer it if you can.
Okay, so I mean, Bitcoin's obviously a peer-to-peer network, right? Mm-hmm. So I think Satoshi said that people were asking him, how is this going to scale? Because as the blockchain grows, you need a much more powerful computer to run the software. So now the blockchain's going towards 100 gigabytes. So that's getting way out of the range of what a kind of somebody who likes Bitcoin and wants to help it is going to be prepared to do to support the network. And Satoshi said, that eventually the ultimate configuration of the network would be to have kind of full nodes, but then really most of the users are going to be on SPV. The problem with SPV is that full nodes don't deliver SPV. So you have to go through another party. So what's happened in Bitcoin is that everybody's really accessing Bitcoin through servers, not through the actual network. And the Bitcoin developers don't really they're not really focused on that. They're focused on the core protocol. And we use the core protocol. The core of Dash is the Bitcoin protocol, essentially. And we kind of build layers on top of that.
Okay, so building layers on top of the core protocol versus Bitcoin, like you said, developers building layers on top of servers that are accessing the protocol in the core system. I mean, is that?
Yeah. So Bitcoin, you've got the core protocol, but nobody can really access it. Unless nobody can access it and gain the full benefits. You tend to get networks built on top, like Dark Wallet. These are kind of other peer-to-peer networks which are decentralized, but they sit on top of Bitcoin. OpenBazaar, BitSquare, things like that. But the big problem with all of this is that all of these peer-to-peer networks are volunteer-based, so they're not incentivized. So if you look at other things like BitTorrent, Tor, it's the same situation. So basically, Dash, we incentivize the nodes. So with that, we've got 4,000 full nodes, all incentivized. So we can actually use those to build out services which get closer to the end users. But, we can build that into the protocol. You don't need to build these kind of separate peer-to-peer networks, which are not very decentralized. I mean, Dark Wallet's a good example. If you use it, most of the gateways are down. It just doesn't really work. It's an economic problem.
Well, yeah, the developer is kind of missing, and the other one's maybe in jail. So I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Well, another.
It's a great project. I mean, it's a really good project. I mean, good for them.
It is. I can tell you that it is scheduled to be finished at some point.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Didn't know that. We actually based the original Evolution a year ago was forked off Dark Wallet.
Cool. Interesting. Okay.
Right.
Well, hopefully we'll have.
We were going to have Amir back on soon, but.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it for a while.
Well, Amir Taki, good luck with
whatever
you're dealing with, and hopefully we'll have him on as maybe they eventually come to completion. Yeah. So,
who knows? But
yeah, I like. You're right. I mean, direct access to the protocol must inevitably simplify things and necessarily mean greater security, and then of course. Like you said, the Dash version of things is going to be more decentralized than what Bitcoin is currently really capable of. And of course, 4,000 full nodes. I mean, that's a pretty big secure network there too.
At $10,000 each,
ish, yeah.
It's quite a high bar to get into it. I mean, we could increase the you can decrease the requirement for the collateral to set up your own node, and eventually, that'll probably happen. But we don't really need more than 4,000 nodes right now.
Right.
No, it's already close to the amount of Bitcoin nodes already.
Pretty much the same right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was about to. Yeah, exactly. And a key point, of course, too, that you raised, the incentivization structure. Volunteers are great, and obviously, y'all are opening up projects to volunteers with being open source, and every cryptocurrency, every project we've had on, obviously that's open source, and even some that are maybe not as open source, are
like Hashcoin. That's not so open source.
Yeah, exactly. Are utilizing volunteers, but the key difference is there's a difference between utilizing volunteers and largely relying on them, and that is kind of a fatal flaw of Bitcoin. But conversely, an advantage and a superiority of Dash is that Dash, because of the governance structure, because of the way Dash fundamentally operates, everything is done on an incentivized basis using the network, and that's a beauty of it. And even though all these projects use Dash from the system, it hasn't detracted from the worth of Dash or the enthusiasm for it or the interest in it, and that's a beautiful thing. And did he just drop? Andy, are you there?
Yeah.
There he is. Well, we're coming to break. We got a minute left. I guess we'll maybe wrap up with Andy in the next segment, maybe, and maybe see what else Dash is going on with Dash, and anything else Andy wants to share with us. But great stuff from Dash. Very excited. Already, this evolution project, the preliminary aspect of it's going to kick off in the next. It hasn't detracted from the worth of Dash or the enthusiasm for it or the interest in it, and that's a beautiful thing. And did he just drop? Andy, are you there?
Yeah.
There he is. Well, we're coming to break. We got a minute left. I guess we'll maybe wrap up with Andy in the next segment, maybe, and maybe see what else Dash is going on with Dash, and anything else Andy wants to share with us. But great stuff from Dash. Very excited. Already, this evolution project, the preliminary aspect of it's going to kick off in the next month, and like Evan said, in about a year or so, sometime next year, the Dash evolution will hopefully be fully developed and available and integrated, and the community and the world at large can only benefit from that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. We got 3 more segments, and once we're finished with Andy, we'll get into the elections and all the wonderful chaos that's all about. And I still have my Art of Not Being Governed, 20 Reasons Not to Vote article.
That's probably is that Jamie's article?
I think it probably was. Hold on. Actually, no, Robert Rorschach, okay. Which we'll be right back. Show enough.
Show you right.
Is that what he said? I don't even know. And that is Zhao Tong, ZHOU-TONGED.com. He is, of course,
there's 2 of them, actually.
Oh, I guess that's true. But what do they both go by?
Zhao Tong.
They both do that?
Yeah, they work together on this.
I see. I knew that. That's right. I remember that now from the interview. Anyway, they are a cool team that takes popular songs and adapts the lyrics to Bitcoin topics and themes. And they're not just talented lyricists, but vocalists as well. And there may be something new coming.
No, there is.
There is. Well, I know, but I'm just
friggin' awesome.
Acting like maybe it's still up in the air. I don't know. It is going to be awesome, and hopefully I'll get to hear it soon. Anyway, we're talking with Andy Freer of dash.org. Check it out. Dash Evolution is what we're talking about. And essentially, Dash Evolution is currently a bunch of interrelated mini projects that have been proposed and are going to come to fruition, at least the preliminary aspects of it, in the next month. And then hopefully sometime next year, the fully integrated, fully developed project will be available. And in essence, it is a way to provide easy and seamless use of Dash for even the most lay of laymen, and for the most what's the fledgling of beginners to cryptocurrency to use Dash without relying on third parties, and to do so with a high degree of security.
So you'll finally be able to use it.
Woo! I can't wait. Well, let me see. Andy, let's see what was going to go. We were talking about, too, how important it is that one thing that there's a lot of things that set Dash apart from Bitcoin in very positive ways. And that's what I love talking about, is because as much as I still love Bitcoin and I love both cryptocurrencies and think there's room for both in the market, for the longest time, people acted like Bitcoin was, the next best thing since Jesus Christ, and acted like it was perfect, and it isn't perfect. There are things that, of course, haven't come to fruition that people expected to do so, and even beyond that, there are just things that other cryptocurrencies like Dash have, features that they have that Bitcoin simply does not. And so it's okay, because we can still love Bitcoin and we can still love other crypto like Dash. And of course, the incentivization structure of Dash is what really sets it apart from Bitcoin. That's sort of Bitcoin's Achilles heel, among other things. Of course, one thing that is also Bitcoin's Achilles heel is the block size, something that Dash handled within 24 hours. And Bitcoin could theoretically do it too if it was tweaked just a little differently, but oh well. But anyway, what else can you tell us about Dash evolution, Andy? And then after that, we'll have
Bitcoin's a different product, and it's not going to be handled the same way. So you can't really say that about Bitcoin as you can. I mean, they've designed their coin differently.
No, and that's true. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's a very good point, is a lot of people sort of Pollyannishly, utopianly, I don't think it's a word, talked about Bitcoin for a long time as if it did have all these infinite potential features and acted as all of these different kinds of products that it simply doesn't. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it does, but it has roadblocks.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And so now we have a more realistic situation, and that's all I'm saying. I'm contrasting it with the way people used to be a little bit undue in their speech about it. But
just real quick, I had somebody a friend that doesn't really know anything about Bitcoin point out to me that they were watching some Dash videos and thought it was off-putting that the flaws of Bitcoin were being overly pointed out in a manner to hold Dash up higher. And I agreed with her, because this was, this is just a novice that knows nothing and is just looking in from the outside saying, why are they trying to point out all of these flaws in Bitcoin and try to hold themselves up higher? And, I mean, and that's, maybe. I think that's a mistake in doing that, because especially since a large number of the people that are going to be attracted to Dash are Bitcoin users. Why would you offend them? I think it's a major mistake doing that.
I don't think anyone is intended to offend them. It's probably just like marketing people trying to differentiate it.
Right.
I mean, we don't,
But I mean, this is not something that I came up with. This is something that someone who knows nothing about cryptocurrency pointed out to me from the outside looking in. And I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Now,
I think there's a line there, though, right? Because on the one hand, Bitcoin is, we're all here because of Bitcoin.
Exactly.
And a lot of our stuff's based off of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is about giving people control of their money and not having centralized money.
Right.
I think where the balance comes in is that the direction Satoshi left, the direction it's being taken in now. It isn't necessarily the original vision. Antonopoulos talks about Bitcoin being a protocol. It's like email. It's like the internet or something. But
HTTP.
The way, which is great, and that's good because it's bringing people into it. The more people that come into crypto as a whole, the more people have access to decentralized money. I think the thing is that with Bitcoin is it's going in a certain direction, and that direction is not something that's it's almost getting further away from end users. And it's end users, that's the people who need access to, control of their money.
Exactly.
So take Lightning Network. I mean, that's not an end user solution. That's really a settlement solution that reduces costs for centralized ecosystem providers. You're not going to be able to log in to Lightning Network. So that's not to criticize Bitcoin. It's just to say that, if Bitcoin direction is going in this way, we'll maybe have alternatives that go in other ways as well. That's healthy.
Yeah,
I agree. Well, and too, obviously not every commentator on Dash or Bitcoin is necessarily.
I just think that Dash and all these other coins can be a complement to Bitcoin, not necessarily a competitor or something that's so much better.
I agree. I think they can be both, and it's not a bad thing. Let me explain. Well, one, of course, not every commentator on Dash or Bitcoin necessarily reflects the views, obviously, of the development teams of either or of necessarily anyone else in the community. But I will say this, kind of what Andy was touching upon is the fact that Bitcoin is the standard by which we judge all other crypto for kind of obvious reasons. It was the first. It's still the biggest. And so something that people forget in life is that a lot of words that are concepts that we use in a relative sense, but people confuse them for being absolute. And what I mean is, for instance, when we say something is secure, there's no such thing in a sense as absolute security. It means, well, okay, it's secure, but secure relative to what, right? And there's often an implied standard that is unmentioned and almost forgotten, but is still the basis for the way we talk about, say, something like security. And so what I'm saying is that you almost are forced to sort of talk about Bitcoin vis-a-vis Dash and be negative because of that. And sometimes to promote something, you have to. It's also inevitable that it becomes a criticism of the alternative. Do you know what I'm saying? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a political campaign, where political campaigns are out
exactly
mud-raking smear campaigns.
That's
you know what I'm saying?
That's kind of where I was going.
No, and that's a great point, because that is out there. Yeah. I mean, for sure. But I think that negatively speaking of Bitcoin has to happen. And it's not, even if you have no sort of personal gain from promoting Dash, just as a sort of objective viewpoint, to admit and to and recognize the benefits of something like Dash, you have to do so with respect to, say, Bitcoin, and that necessarily means potentially some criticism or negativity towards Bitcoin. Does that make sense? And so,
well, that's fine. If it's valid against Bitcoin and not a third-party user issue.
Right. Well, and hold on. We're coming to break in 10 seconds. Andy, hold that thought. I want to hear what you have to say on the other side. Okay. And we'll be right back with Andy Freer of Dash, so stay tuned, guys. Welcome back, guys, to the second to last segment of the Crypto Show, and we're wrapping up with Andy Freer, developer from Dash, talking about Dash evolution and other things. And I can't wait. As much as I love talking with Andy about Dash, I still can't wait in our final minutes to talk about the elections. No, but Danny was bringing up a good sort of devil's advocate point about what some have said. A couple voices in the Dash community have said about Bitcoin, and I had some response for that in the last segment. And Andy, you were gearing up to have a response as well, but we got cut off by the break. So if you would resume from where you left off.
Okay, yeah. So I presume that's talking about zero confirmation transactions and merchants accepting those, and then people being able to double spend those.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah. I mean, what you're saying about negativity, totally agree. There's too much negativity. There's no reason to be overly negative about Bitcoin to the point of turning people away from crypto or any crypto, unless it's set up as a scam, basically. But
Yeah. So OneCoin and BitClub, screw those guys.
the space is full of. I mean, it's money, isn't it? People are competing. A lot of people are competing for money, so they end up being overly negative to try to get investors into their project, not another project. So, okay. So about I don't know specifically what that was that some Dash people said, but at the same time, people throw criticism at Dash, saying instant transactions don't work, this kind of stuff. So. I think the thing is that you've got, Bitcoin blocks take, a bit of time to confirm. There's no solution to actually have any way to kind of have security within that time. But Dash has basically instant transactions through a locking mechanism on the network. So yes, it's wrong to criticize Bitcoin, but at the same time, that is a kind of a solution to zero confirmation transactions. You're using a locking service off a network.
That's why,
to have backup transactions.
That's why Dash could complement Bitcoin in that manner.
Again, it's like that's better for end users. If it's Bitcoin's going more towards businesses and settlements, then it's less important. It's just a different thing,
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's a different thing. I mean, but it's like anything else in the market. There's complementarity and competitiveness and. Whatever ends up being better for the consumer and whatever the end result is through that free competitive process is a good thing. But yeah, and just to recapitulate what I was